Welcome back to our channel, where we present stories about great personalities and the brands they built. These stories teach us that often, it does not matter if you were born poor or were disadvantaged in the early years of your life. With persistence, curiosity, and the right goal in life, you can achieve a lot. This is the story of our today's hero, Henry Royce, who was born into a poor family and had to support his family when he was still a child. However, with his hard work, he built one of the most recognizable brands in the world. Today, we will talk about Rolls-Royce, a truly unique brand of ultra-premium cars. It produces only a few cars a year, but because of this, each of them literally turns into a legend of its time. The outlines of the interior just scream that the owner of this car is damn rich. The car tells you that its owner has nowhere to rush because he has achieved everything a long time ago. Today we will just talk about what a Rolls-Royce is, how its first cars appeared, and how an ordinary meeting of two enthusiasts forever changed not only their lives but also the lives of thousands of wealthy people. Today, Rolls-Royce Motor Cars is a wholly owned subsidiary of BMW. BMW had control over Rolls-Royce since 1998 after BMW licensed the rights to the Rolls-Royce brand name and logo from Rolls-Royce Holdings plc. This way, an already luxury brand which is BMW, further expanded its business to produce ultra-premium cars known for their luxury, prestige, comfort, and reliability. All these words fully describe every Rolls-Royce car that has been produced for over 100 years. The history of Rolls-Royce began in May 1904 at the moment when Henry Royce, a British engineer, met for the most ordinary lunch with a British aviator, race car driver, and the owner of one of the first car dealerships, Charles Rolls. Henry's family could not boast of large incomes. Henry Royce was born as the fifth child of James Royce, an ordinary miller who worked at a rented mill. The family's financial situation was so bad that they even had to leave their home and move to London in search of a better life. Of course, the father was the main earner in the family, and he found a pretty good job in the capital. However, after studying for a mere year at the new school, Henry had to mature. It just so happened that in 1872 Henry's father died. Henry had to earn money for the family by selling newspapers and delivering mail. At that time, he was only 9 years old. Left without a father, Henry had to learn everything on his own. Thanks to a good relationship with his aunt, who supported Henry financially, in 1878 he started an apprenticeship with the Great Northern Railway Company. It was there that the young boy learned to understand various mechanisms and their structure. Later, this experience helped Henry get a job in an electric company. After a while, the man moved to Liverpool. Henry coped with his job at the company better than others. With that, he quickly made good acquaintances, one of which turned out to be a like-minded person, Ernest Claremont. A few days after they met, they realized that they were dreaming of the same thing, namely, to create something of their own. But alas, as is often the case, they simply did not have the money for this. So the idea was carried in their heads for several years while money was being accumulated to open their own business. In 1884, having accumulated £20, Royce and Claremont, who contributed £50, founded a manufacturing plant to produce electrical appliances. At that time, Henry was only 22 years old, and they started producing electric doorbells. What kind of bells were they? They looked very simple, much more straightforward than the competition, and cost almost twice as much, but they never broke. Royce already then came up with a formula for his future endeavors: the price is forgotten, and the quality remains for a long time. Already in 1894, Royce founded a company for the production of cranes, named Royce and Company. 5 years later, the company even issued its shares on the stock exchange and built a factory in Manchester where cranes designed by Royce were produced even after his death until 1964.
When it does not exist, design it.
It was during this period that Royce, who had saved up some money, was able to buy his first French-made car. However, after driving his de Dion car for several years, Henry realized that he was absolutely dissatisfied with the quality of the French cars. As Henry himself later recalled, the car did not meet its stated requirements and broke down so often that he even had to disassemble and reassemble the car on his own. It was then that frequent breakdowns and low-quality components inspired the man to create a car built according to his own design. It was that time when Henry Royce started to build his first cars. He made his first car, a two-cylinder Royce 10, in his Manchester factory in 1904. At the same moment, fate brought Royce to Charles Rolls, an equally interested motorist. As for Charles, his life was a completely different story from his youth. He was fond of mechanical engineering and even studied it at the University of Cambridge. In addition, he was the first student in his class who independently purchased a car and began to race. It is worth noting that he was lucky to be born into a noble and very wealthy family, which has always supported any young man's endeavors. So, thanks to connections and a good financial situation, Charles Rolls opened a car dealership to sell foreign-made cars. And everything would be fine, but the only problem was the suppliers, who continuously disrupted the delivery of cars and components, and sometimes even delivered absolutely the wrong thing. For several years, the man was looking for a reliable partner. Let me remind you, it was 1904. At that time, most people hadn't even heard of cars, and Henry Ford had only launched its then small production a year ago. In general, Charles had a hard time with his business. He alone was engaged in this very difficult task, but, as you already understood, it was exactly until the moment when he met Henry Royce. They met on the 4th of May, 1904, in the restaurant of the Midland Hotel in Manchester. Now there is a memorial plaque hanging there that celebrates that meeting. Royce was 41 and Rolls was 26. Besides the age gap, there was another big difference between the two men. One was a self-made man who had to achieve everything through hard work. The other was the son of wealthy parents who had everything given to him. But they quickly found common interests. In spite of his preference for 3- or 4-cylinder cars, Rolls was impressed with the Royce 10, and in a subsequent agreement on December 23, 1904 agreed to take all the cars Royce could make. There would be 4 models. A 10-horsepower, 2-cylinder model selling at 395 pounds, which amounts to $82,000 in 2023. A 15-horsepower, 3-cylinder at 500 pounds amounting to $103,000 today. A 20-horsepower, 4-cylinder at 650 pounds amounting to $125,000. And a 30-horsepower, 6-cylinder model priced at 890 pounds, which equals to $18,600 today. All would be badged as Rolls-Royces and be sold exclusively by Rolls. The first Rolls-Royce car, the Rolls-Royce 10 horsepower, was unveiled at the Paris Salon in December 1904. Thanks to good public relations, Rolls quickly informed the press that he was working on his own car production, thereby fueling interest in the future novelty. The union of these two men, one might say, was perfect. Henry Royce made great cars in terms of engineering, but Charles Rolls was great at selling them. From the very beginning of the joint venture, all powers were equally distributed. Henry was not interfering with sales and commerce, and Charles did not interfere with Henry's creating the cars. Perhaps this was one of the main secrets of success, as the founders of the company perfectly complemented each other.
Small things make perfection, but perfection is not a small thing.
The company, named Rolls-Royce, by the end of the year, was successfully selling cars. The first model was Silver Ghost, designed at the Royce factory in Manchester. It first went on the road in 1907. Initially, it had a 6-cylinder engine with a volume of 7,036 cubic centimeters. However, already in 1909, it was increased to 7,428 cubic centimeters. The price of the new model, released by the young company Rolls-Royce, was unthinkable at the time, £985 sterling, which amounts to almost $200,000 in today's money. And this was the price just for the chassis with a motor. The buyers, having paid almost £1,000, had to pay the same amount for the body, taking the overall price of the vehicle to almost £2,000 sterling. For this money, one could buy a mansion in London, but even so, the founders would not drop the price. They used everything best and modern in their cars, primarily focusing on quality and trying as much as possible to distance themselves from the lower quality competitors of that time. And it is worth saying that the car nevertheless found its buyers. A total of 7,874 Silver Ghost cars were produced from 1907 to 1926, including 1,701 from the American Springfield factory. The car was very popular among rich people and even racers. But the most interesting was yet to come. Despite the success of Silver Ghost, the company had to expand and innovate constantly. And it soon became clear that there was definitely not enough money to pace with the competition. To raise the necessary funds, the company was incorporated under the name Rolls-Royce Limited on March 15, 1906. This helped Royce and Rolls to acquire a large plant in Derby, but the founders were left with fewer shares themselves. Both of them, obviously, entered the first board of directors and took executive roles. Rolls became the company's chief engineer. Royce was appointed the technical director. The founders understood that the largest and fastest growing market was located overseas. That is why, after the first presentation of a joint car, they went to the USA to present their novelty car there personally. At that time, one event occurred that forever changed the brand's history. During the trip, Rolls met the Wright brothers, the creators of the world's first aircraft. And soon, aviation took possession of Charles's heart so much that he became seriously interested in flying. He quickly mastered all the necessary knowledge in this area, and a few months later, he flew the aircraft for the first time. He was even able to fly independently across the English Channel. Since then, aviation has become another serious business of the new company. Having discussed all the details, Rolls-Royce developed the first aircraft engine. As usual, the chief designer of the aircraft engines was Henry. The Rolls-Royce engines are successfully produced to this day and are still considered the standard and the best of their kind. Rolls-Royce aircraft engines made the most important contribution to the Second World War because it was Henry's invention that accounted for more than half of Allied aviation. Airplanes with Rolls-Royce engines crossed the Atlantic in 16 hours and were the first to fly from England to Australia. It is believed that it was thanks to this part of the business that the Rolls-Royce company managed to stay afloat during the First World War. The partners had many plans for the future, and it is unknown what the company would be like today. But the situation changed dramatically in 1910. One ordinary day, Henry Royce receives one of the most terrible news of his life. During another landing competition, Charles Rolls dies at an altitude of about 7 meters at Hengistbury Airfield. The tail of his right flyer broke off during a flying display, leaving the pilot no chance. Thus, Charles Rolls became the first in England pilot to crash to death. A death that speaks to the life of this extraordinary person. This man loved to be the first and risk his life in racing and later in airplane competitions. From that moment, all rights to the company, all finances, as well as all problems were inherited by Royce. Wartime became a period of stagnation in the automotive industry for the company. But even during this period, Henry Royce tried to create something new to keep the company afloat. Through hard work, in 1921, Royce opened a plant in the United States, where the R engine was developed for airplanes built specifically for air racing. The factory also helped meet a 3-year backlog demand where a further 1,703 Springfield Ghosts and 1,241 Phantoms were built. This factory operated for 10 years, with the first car being completed on January 17, 1921. In 1922, another Rolls-Royce car appeared in the world, called Rolls-Royce 20. Given the niche that the manufacturer occupied, the number of cars sold was measured not in thousands but in hundreds, and it was tough to maintain production with such volumes. So, having thought over the development strategy, this car was created specifically for middle-class drivers, doctors, lawyers, and businessmen. The car was equipped with a 6-cylinder engine with a volume of 3,127 cubic centimeters and developed a speed of 99 kilometers an hour. The price for the car was £1,600 at that time, which amounts to $116,000 today. In 1925, the first generation of the Phantom series came to replace the Silver Ghost. The car was assembled both in the UK and in the USA. Only 3,463 of these cars were produced, and already in 1929, Phantom 1 was replaced by Phantom 2. This car was the first of its kind, accelerating to 120 km per hour. Phantom 2 was produced up to 1935 when it was replaced by Phantom 3, which was the final large pre-war Rolls-Royce. It was the only V12 Rolls-Royce until the 1998 introduction of the Silver Seraph. In 1931, Rolls-Royce acquired a portion of the assets of its competitor, Bentley, which had gotten into a troubled financial situation. Thus, with this acquisition, Rolls-Royce killed two birds, getting additional production capacities and removing a competitor from the battlefield.
I have only one regret, that I have not worked harder.
Here, we have reached the year 1933. At that time, Henry was already 70 years old, and he was already barely coping with all his duties, but at the same time, he did not leave the post of chief engineer, remaining the design genius behind the new cars. But on April 22, 1933, Henry Royce died at his house in Elmstead in West Wittering. Royce's death was a shattering blow for Rolls-Royce, which had lost its design genius. The car manufacturing world was in the grip of rapid change, which demanded unprecedented levels of efficiency in decision-making, and putting those decisions into effect, Rolls-Royce had to change. The Second World War made certain adjustments in the development of the company and the pace of production of new cars, with bombings of cities carried out by both Germany and Britain. The production of Phantom III stopped from 1939 all the way to 1949. With the end of the Second World War, the Silver Wraith was the first post-war Rolls-Royce. It was made from 1946 to 1958. Already in 1949, the Rolls-Royce Silver Dawn was put into mass production. And a year later, the company began to produce the Phantom IV model, sold only to buyers whom Rolls-Royce considered worthy of the distinction, the British royal family and heads of state. 16 of these cars are known to still exist in museums as well as in public and private collections. The main feature of the Phantom IV was the fact that the car could travel at a walking pace for a long time. This feature was necessary during official ceremonies. And its engine did not overheat at all. In 1955, Rolls-Royce rolled out its new Silver Cloud, which was produced by Rolls-Royce Limited from April 1955 to March 1966. It was the core model of the Rolls-Royce range during that period. The Silver Cloud replaced the Silver Dawn and was, in turn, replaced in 1965 by the Silver Shadow. In 1959, the Phantom IV was replaced by the Perfect Phantom V, which gathered all the characteristics of previous models. Notable owners of Phantom V include Elton John, Elvis Presley, John Lennon, Charles III, and Elizabeth II. The year 1968 was marked for Rolls-Royce with the release of the Phantom VI. The car was produced exclusively in limousine bodies and was discontinued only in 1990. A total of 374 Phantom VI were made. In the 70s, the company went through a period of crisis, and in 1971, Rolls-Royce officially became bankrupt. The situation was saved by ordinary residents of the UK, as well as the government. The latter invested $250 million in the company's development.
Rolls-Royce may be bankrupt, but one of their divisions still produces the best cars in the world.
The first model that appeared after the crisis was Rolls-Royce Corniche. The Rolls-Royce Corniche is a two-door, front-engine, rear-wheel drive luxury car produced as a hardtop coupe from 1971 to 1980 and as a convertible from 1971 to 2002. From that moment until the 90s, Rolls-Royce issued several models, including Rolls-Royce Camargue, Rolls-Royce Silver Spirit, and Rolls-Royce Silver Seraph. The company decided to celebrate its 90th anniversary with the release of the Rolls-Royce Flying Spur. In total, there are 50 such copies in the world, which sold out in just 2 days, but the company did not manage to stay afloat on its own. Every second, a huge number of cars were produced in the world, and in turn, Rolls-Royce was not an easy car due to the decision to handcraft each car, which led to the ability to only make a handful of cars a year. In 1998, the control over the company passed into the hands of the German concern BMW, while the Bentley brand passed into the possession of the Volkswagen Group concern. But the transition to another concern in no way prevented the development of the Rolls-Royce brand. It still holds a leading position in its luxury car segment and continues to enjoy unwavering popularity among Hollywood celebrities and aristocratic families around the world. Since the acquisition of Rolls-Royce by BMW, the release of the new vehicles accelerated. The brand started to release modern-looking vehicles like the new Phantom 7 and Phantom 8, Phantom Coupe, Ghost Series 1 and Series 2, Wraith, Dawn, Boattail, and the newest all-electric Rolls-Royce Spectre. There have always been legends about Rolls-Royce, and most of them are true. So, for example, absolutely every assembled car is subjected to tests in the form of 2,000 kilometers of test run, and then the car is again dismantled to the screw. At that moment, each of its details is carefully checked, and only after that the body is painted, and final assembly takes place. After all, it will soon be driven not by a simple hard worker but by a royal person or a president. Another interesting story revolves around the hood ornament on Rolls-Royce cars. This hood ornament decoration is called Spirit of Ecstasy and it debuted in 1911. It was commissioned by Baron John Edward Scott Montague, an automobile collector. The sculpture is based on the likeness of his secretary-turned-mistress, Eleanor Thornton, with whom John had an affair that lasted over 10 years. In earlier iterations of the figurine, her finger was pressed to her lips. Their romance saw an unfortunate end when Thornton died at sea in 1915 on a ship en route to India that was sunk by a German U-boat. Charles Sykes, the artist that sculpted the statuette, adopted and redefined its design for Rolls-Royce, and it's been in use ever since. But wait, that's not all. In 2002, when BMW acquired Rolls-Royce from Volkswagen, the rights to the Spirit of Ecstasy emblem were still held by Volkswagen. BMW had to pay an additional $40 million to secure the prized ownership of the mascot. The coloring of Rolls-Royce cars is carried out in 12 layers of nitro paint since synthetics do not give a sense of color depth. In this case, each layer is polished before the next one is applied. One pair of hands has been painting the pinstripes on all Rolls-Royce cars for the past 17 years, and they belong to Mark Court. At the beginning of the journey, Henry Royce climbed up from poverty with his desire to create something new, a better quality car. His approach to each car was as an individual project, adapted to each specific customer, and he even came up with the slogan that there would be no two identical Rolls-Royces, much like there are no two identical customers. He aimed to build each car with utmost care for the details, which distinguished his cars from the rest mass-produced brands. With that, each finishing element must be as perfect as each mechanism in the car. And perhaps the most famous fact is that all Rolls-Royce cars are assembled only in the UK and still by hand. There are only 2 robots at the Goodwood factory that apply paint to the body. All other work is done by true professionals. To this day, Rolls-Royce cars remain a symbol of taste and prosperity. The quality of Rolls-Royce cars is evidenced by the fact that 60% of ever-produced cars are still on the move, and at the same time, they are only getting more expensive every day. The company was created by 2 patriots of the automotive industry, 2 people with a heart and soul dedicated to their work. And this seems to be the main success of this and many other businesses started by people who burn with an idea and a desire to enrich the world with their invention. And which luxury brand do you love the most? Which one would you love to take for a ride? Tell us which one it is in the comments. And for this video, that's all for today. Rate our video, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for future inspiring videos.